The chill of an October morning swept through Chicago in 1931 as strangers crowded the Riverside estate sale. The grand Tudor-style mansion loomed like a relic of another age, its halls now filled with bargain hunters sifting through decades of memories reduced to price tags. Among them moved antique dealer Sophia Martinez, her practiced eyes scanning every corner with trained precision. To her, junk and treasure were separated in a single glance. The estate belonged to the Williamson family, a dynasty that had held this house for nearly a century. The last heir, elderly Margaret Williamson, had passed away childless, leaving behind rooms heavy with history. Now strangers picked apart her life piece by piece. Inside the wood-paneled library, Sophia's attention was caught by a series of framed photographs neatly arranged on an antique mahogany desk. Weddings, graduations, holiday gatherings, the usual milestones of a wealthy family. But one frame stopped her cold. It was different. Its ornate silver border was tarnished with time, but the photograph within was striking. Judging by the style of dress, it dated back to the early 1920s. A young couple sat posed in their living room. The husband in a three-piece suit, hair slicked back with the confidence of the age. His wife in a drop-waist flapper dress, smiling gently beside him. In her arms, a baby no more than 6 months old, dressed in a delicate christening gown of fine white lace. At first glance, it looked like the perfect portrait of prosperity and happiness from the roaring 20s. But the longer Sophia studied it, the more unsettled she felt. The parents smiled with warmth and pride, but the child's eyes told a different story. The infant's gaze was unnervingly intense, almost knowing. Not the blank innocence of a baby, but something sharper, fearful, a look as if he could already see what was coming. Sophia bought the portrait for $25, a small price for something that felt like a secret waiting to be uncovered. Back at her antique shop in Lincoln Park, she removed the photo from its frame. Experience had taught her that the real clues often lay hidden on the back. Sure enough, there it was, an embossed mark. Henryk Kowalski Photography Studio, Chicago, Illinois. Beneath it, a date written in elegant script, October 15, 1920. And below that, in different handwriting, Robert, Catherine, and baby Thomas Williamson. Sophia's pulse quickened. She knew the name Kowalski. Henryk Kowalski had been one of Chicago's most sought-after portrait photographers of the 1920s, famed for capturing the city's wealthy elite. Collectors prized his work, but Sophia knew something else about him. He had kept meticulous archives. If those records still existed, they might hold answers. Hours later, after digging through newspaper databases and historical records, Sophia found more than she expected. Robert Williamson, the father, had been a prominent banker. His wife, Catherine, was born into railroad money. A powerful couple in Chicago's elite circle, but it was their child who made Sophia freeze. In the Chicago Tribune archives, she found an obituary. Baby Thomas Williamson had died in November 1920, barely a month after the photograph was taken. Cause of death, sudden infant death syndrome. Sophia looked at the portrait again. Now the child's expression felt even more haunting, as if in that single frozen moment he knew what was coming, as if the camera had captured something that no human eye could have seen. She picked up her phone. There was one person who might help her make sense of this. Dr. Elizabeth Chen, a photography historian at Northwestern University. I found a 1920 Kowalski portrait that's unusual, Sophia explained. The parents looked joyful, but the baby's expression, it's as if he saw something they didn't. Dr. Chen's interest sharpened immediately. Bring it tomorrow. Kowalski had a reputation for capturing truths his subjects never intended to reveal. The next morning, Sophia stepped into Dr. Chen's office, a space that felt more like a museum. Vintage cameras lined the walls, portraits from 2 centuries stared back in silence. Under the glow of specialized lighting, Dr. Chen examined the photograph with care. Kowalski was remarkable, she murmured. He didn't just capture faces, he captured essence. Look at the detail, the texture of the mother's dress, the christening lace, the clarity of expression. But here, the infant's gaze, it's not random. He's looking to the left towards something outside the frame. Sophia leaned closer. You think he saw something? Perhaps, Dr. Chen replied, but this isn't curiosity. This looks like fear. And notice, Kowalski's known for natural light. Yet this photo has shadows from multiple sources. Something bright, something unnatural, came from the same direction the baby is staring. Dr. Chen removed her glasses, her voice lower now. Infants don't focus like this without cause. Something was in that room, something we can't see. Sophia's voice was barely a whisper. He died a month later. Dr. Chen's expression darkened. That changes everything. What began as a simple purchase at an estate sale was quickly spiraling into something deeper. A mystery that stretched back more than a century, buried in the history of one of Chicago's wealthiest families. And the photograph, the haunting eyes of baby Thomas, was only the beginning. The building that once belonged to the Williamson family still stood proudly on North Lakeshore Drive. Its limestone walls had witnessed more than a century of secrets. The unit that had once been theirs was now home to Dr. Amanda Foster, a pediatrician who had bought the condo precisely because of its history. When Sophia called to explain her research into the portrait and the family's tragedies, Dr. Foster's response was immediate. I'd love to help, she said, but I should warn you, there are some unusual things about this apartment, things you'll want to see. Dr. Foster's home occupied the entire third floor. High ceilings, wide windows overlooking Lake Michigan, restored woodwork that carried whispers of another time. Sophia could almost see the Williamsons still moving through the halls, unaware their lives would soon be cut short. This is the living room, Dr. Foster said, leading her into a spacious, elegant room with gleaming hardwood floors and crown molding. I believe your photograph was taken here. Sophia compared the portrait to the space. The details matched, the window placement, the proportions of the walls, the very spot where baby Thomas had stared into the camera with eyes too heavy for his age. When I moved in, Dr. Foster continued, I was fascinated by the Williamson story, especially their children. 2 infant deaths in such a short time. Even as a pediatrician, that disturbed me. I've seen thousands of cases, but 2 asides deaths in one family within 2 years is extraordinarily rare. Her voice dropped lower. I found things left behind in the basement. I think you should see them. From a folder on her bookshelf, she produced papers yellowed with age, household bills, old photographs, and then a letter, dated November 20th, 1920. Just 5 days after Thomas's death, written by Catherine Williamson to her sister. Sophia unfolded it with trembling hands. The handwriting was shaky, broken. Dearest Margaret, I cannot remain in this house another day. Thomas is gone, just as Mary was, and I know in my heart that Robert. I cannot bring myself to write the words, but you know what I fear. The doctor says it was the same condition that took Mary, but I have seen how Robert looks at the children when no one is watching. There is something cold in his eyes, something that chills me. I found the bottle of laudanum hidden in his study, far more than any man would need, and the night Thomas died, Robert was alone with him for more than an hour before he called for help. When I touched my baby's skin, it was so cold, so very cold. Sophia's breath caught. She looked at Dr. Foster, whose face was grim. That's not all, Foster said, and come with me. She led Sophia down the hall to her office, once the Williamson nursery. A section of the original wallpaper had been preserved under glass. At first it looked like an ordinary floral design, faded but intact. Then Sophia noticed the interruptions. Tiny dark fingerprints pressed into the paper at crib height. "There are more," Dr. Foster whispered, pointing to another preserved section. "Larger stains, uneven. I had them tested. They contained laudanum residue." Sophia's stomach twisted. "He was poisoning them." "I believe so," Dr. Foster said. "Systematically dosing his own children. Catherine suspected it but couldn't prove it. Laudanum was everywhere in 1920, sold in pharmacies without question. The symptoms in infants could easily be mistaken for CDS. From her desk, she produced one more artifact, a torn diary entry written in Catherine's desperate hand. October 10th, 1920. "Thomas has been so drowsy, far more than he should be. When I mention it, Robert grows angry. I've seen him give Thomas medicine, but afterward the baby sinks into unnatural sleep. I found the brown bottle again. He claims it's for his back pain, yet I never see him take it. The scratches on the glass, as if doses are being measured. Tonight I will not close my eyes. Tonight I will watch. I will protect Thomas, even if—" The entry ended abruptly. Sophia stared at the letter, at the diary, at the preserved stains on the wall, and then at the photograph. The baby's eyes weren't wandering. They weren't unfocused. They were fixed on something, someone. "His father," Sophia whispered. Dr. Foster nodded. "Babies sense danger. That expression is recognition, instinctive fear of the one person who should have protected him." The pieces were aligning, but Sophia needed more. She tracked down Henryk Kowalski's studio archives, now housed at Columbia College. There she met Dr. Marcus Webb, an archivist, who carefully opened the 1920 ledger. The Williamson entry was precise. October 15th, 1920. Robert and Catherine Williamson with infant son Thomas. Commissioned for holiday cards, $50 paid. Notes, natural light supplemented with reflector. Mrs. W., very nervous, repeatedly checking child. Mr. W., impatient. Infant became distressed whenever father approached. Mother refused to allow father to hold child. Final exposures show child in visible distress. Mrs. W. requested removal of certain poses. Sophia's skin prickled. Even the photographer had noticed. Dr. Webb then produced something else, a letter Catherine had written to Kowalski just 10 days after Thomas's death. "Dear Mr. Kowalski, I must request all photographs and negatives from our October session. My husband insists. But I ask a personal favor. If you observed anything unusual about my family that day, please record it and preserve it. I fear there may come a time when such observations matter. I enclose payment for an additional set to be kept in your personal files. Do not mention this to my husband. P.S. My baby's eyes in that final photograph. You captured something important. Please protect it." Sophia sat frozen. This wasn't just tragedy. It was evidence. Evidence of a crime that had hidden in plain sight for 100 years. She took everything to Detective Maria Santos of Chicago's Cold Case Unit. Though the crimes were beyond prosecution, Santos studied the material with grim focus. "This is the profile of a family annihilator," she said. 2 dead infants in one family. Laudanum readily available. A wealthy, untouchable father, and if you think it ended there, you'd be wrong. Santos dug into later records. In 1925, Robert Williamson remarried a wealthy widow, Helen Morrison, who had 2 children of her own. Both died within 2 years. The boy at 6 supposedly of pneumonia, the girl at 4 of a wasting illness. Helen herself wasted away and died by 1928. By 1930, Robert had inherited her fortune and fled Chicago for California. He lived in comfort until his death in 1954. No more wives, no more children. Sophia whispered the words before she could stop herself. He did it again. Detective Santos closed her laptop. What you've uncovered, Miss Martinez, is the shadow of a serial killer. A man who murdered those closest to him, hiding behind wealth, respectability, and the blind spots of his time. And that baby, she tapped the photograph. That baby knew, somehow, in that instant, he knew. Sophia thought it was the end of the trail, but then her phone rang. The voice on the other end belonged to Dr. Patricia Williamson, a retired psychiatrist living in Portland, and she claimed to be family. Dr. Patricia Williamson introduced herself as the great niece of Catherine Williamson. She had been tracing her family's past for years, searching for answers about what truly became of Catherine after she fled Chicago in 1920. Your research may have finally uncovered what I've been looking for, she told Sophia. When they met in Chicago the following week, Dr. Williamson carried with her a collection of family papers passed down through Catherine's sister Margaret. Inside were the pieces of Catherine's life, sent in fragments over the years, and among them the complete diary Catherine had written between 1920 and 1925. It was a heartbreaking record of a woman trapped in silence, slowly realizing the man she had married was a murderer. The diary entry from October 15, 1920, the day of the portrait, was chilling. Catherine wrote of insisting Thomas be included, though Robert argued it would spoil the formality. She described watching her husband's face as he looked at the baby with the same cold calculation she remembered when Mary was ill. Not the gaze of a father, but the stare of a man measuring a problem to be removed. She noted how the photographer, Henryk Kowalski, had noticed Thomas's unease, how the baby grew restless every time Robert drew near. Catherine confessed her growing fear that her husband saw his children not as blessings, but as obstacles. Hidden among Robert's papers, she had even found evidence of life insurance policies and financial documents she could not decipher. Sometimes, she wrote, she caught him studying her the same way he looked at the children. The following pages chronicled her despair after Thomas's death. In November, Catherine wrote of finding bottles of laudanum in Robert's study, the sickly sweet smell unmistakable. When she confronted him, he dismissed her as hysterical, insisting it was medicine left over from her headaches. But Catherine no longer believed his lies. I cannot grieve with the man who killed my babies. Tomorrow I will go to Margaret. I must leave before he decides that I too have become an obstacle. 6 months after Sophia's first discovery, the Williamson portrait had become the center of academic debate. At Northwestern University, Dr. Chen hosted a symposium titled Photography as Historical Evidence, the Case of the Williamson Portrait. Scholars, criminologists, and historians gathered, the enlarged photograph of the family displayed at the front of the hall. Sophia stood before them, her voice steady, her eyes fixed on the haunting image of baby Thomas. This photograph proves that truth has a way of surviving, even when silence and power try to bury it. Thomas could not speak, could not defend himself, but his eyes told a story that endured for over a century. In the audience, Dr. Patricia Williamson wiped tears from her face. After the presentation, she approached Sophia with one last piece of the puzzle. Catherine's final letter, written in 1965, just before her death. It had remained sealed, meant only for the day someone finally uncovered the truth. With trembling hands, Sophia unfolded the fragile page. Catherine's words spilled across the faded ink. To whoever reads this, my babies were murdered by their father, Robert Williamson, and I was powerless to stop him. For 45 years, I have carried this truth. If you are reading now, it means my son's eyes have finally spoken. Please remember that he was loved, that his life mattered, however brief. Evil can wear a respectable face, but truth endures. Thank you for listening to my child's silent testimony. As the symposium emptied, Sophia stayed behind, her gaze locked on the portrait. What once seemed like a simple family photograph now stood as evidence of a century-old crime, a voice for the voiceless. The photograph eventually found its home in the Chicago History Museum. Visitors often lingered in front of it, puzzled by the unusual expression in the infant's eyes, but now, at last, they could understand. Baby Thomas had been trying to warn the world, and his story was finally heard.